Byron Katie Reed entered middle age, depressed by her divorce, going downward in a spiral of self-pity. Then one morning, from the depths of despair, she experienced a life-changing realization. Katie saw that when she believed that something should be different than it is, such as, my husband should love me more, my children should appreciate me, she suffered. And that when she didn't believe these thoughts, she felt peace. She realized that what had been causing her depression was not the world around her, but her beliefs that she had about the world around her. In a flash of insight, Katie saw that our attempt to find happiness was backwards. Instead of hopelessly trying to change the world to match our thoughts about how it should be, we can question these thoughts and, by meeting reality as it is, experience unimaginable joy. Well, it has brought joy to her life because she is a very successful workshop purveyor, but I don't think the joy comes from the obvious money that she is earning. She has taken this realization around the world and these seminars and workshops and elaborates on a process that she calls the work. And the work consists of 4 steps or questions. First, is it true? The second, can you absolutely be sure that it's true? And the third, how do you react when you think that thought, when you believe that thought? And the fourth, who would you be without that thought? The first question is about finding reality. We tell ourselves so many stories that we set ourselves up for failure. Like, kids should be quiet. Is that true? Is that how kids actually are? I mean, look at kids worldwide. If you see any film where somebody's passing through the village, just a visitor, the kids just are all jumping around them and they're noisy. I mean, look at these kids when you see them at school playgrounds, when you see them on TV. Is it true that they're quiet? How many kids do you see that are advanced meditative mystics? No, worldwide you see kids laughing and playing loudly. The only time they seem to be quiet is when some charity is holding them up on their arms and their brown eyes are looking out at you and saying, give this child some money every month. And then when they show, after the kid gets money, they show them playing loudly. It seems that being loud is part of the definition of being childish. So what is the reality of childhood? Is it realistic to expect children to be quiet? I remember this past Christmas, my grandson Jonathan and I were taping up our many Christmas cards along the edge of this huge mirror that we have in our dining room. And when we put the last one up, he started doing this. This usually annoys me. But on that day, I was wise enough to turn to my son who was in the other room and say, I'd ask him to act his age, but I'm afraid he might actually be acting his age. Nine-year-olds tend to get excited 3 days before Christmas. If we did not expect our kids to be quiet, we would spend less time yelling at them. They do get better at being quiet as they get older. So maybe we should not take the baby to the symphony and expect them to be quiet. And they probably will have a harder time learning to be quiet, for when we yell at them to shut up, we are hardly a good model of quietude. Byron Katie writes, "If you want something to be different than it is, you might as well teach a cat to bark. You can try, and in the end the cat will look up and say, meow." Wanting something different than what is hopeless. What is. You don't get a vote. Have you noticed? When I argue with reality, I lose, but only 100% of the time. At the level of the first question, she is an advocate of practicality. To fight against reality only hurts us. Love what is. We do not have to make the world better in order to love it. We do not have to make our children better in order to love them. We do not have to improve our partner. We do not have to make ourselves better before loving ourselves. Love the world. Love your children. Love your lover. Love yourself. Now. I have trouble with this. I see the world has many problems. Children often behave differently than what I want and what I think is right. And I wish that I was better. I can't just sit by and let things go to hell. I've got to do something. But her philosophy is not one of giving up. It's choosing how we use the precious energy of our life. Why fight against what cannot be changed? But just because gravity exists does not mean we cannot fly. Imagine the windswept beaches of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. What would have happened if the Wright brothers had declared gravity to be morally wrong? This is just wrong, this gravity stuff. It interferes with all the things we want to do. This gravity is wrong. I'm going to prove it's wrong by sitting on this round boulder and wish them into the sky. So the first question is it true? Is it something outside of ourselves that's causing our problems? Sometimes the answer to this question is obviously yes. So that's why Byron Katie asked the second question. Can you absolutely know that it's true? This is a question of epistemology. I like that word, epistemology. It's a fancy philosophical term for the question, how do we know what we know? Is it possible to know what we don't know? What can we know? Absolutely. Now, this is right in line with Unitarian Universalist epistemology. We enjoy the exception to the rule. If someone says something is an absolute truth, we are pretty good at finding that it isn't. We seek higher powers as we define them. Ultimate reality is subject to our personal perceptions. Even if there is something that is true, our limited perspective prevents us from really knowing. An extreme version of this is that maybe reality is only our perception. So far, you people have been a pleasant dream to me. But this subjective epistemology can lead some people to despair. Leads me to despair because I really enjoy being right. It feels good to be right. But if there is no right or wrong, how can I know what to do? How do I decide? How can my life have a purpose if every direction I turn is equally valid? Or if every direction I turn is only a figment of my imagination? Byron Katie reacts differently to this. For her, there is a joy in not knowing. She sees this as a ticket to freedom, an opportunity to create our own reality. She says, I don't know is my favorite position. I think she's a militant agnostic. We suffer only until we realize that we can't know anything. The world is my perception of it. I see and hear only through the filter of my story. Ultimately, I am all I can know. You either believe what you think or you question it. There is no other choice. And this questioning kicks into high gear by the time she asks question 3. How do you react when you think that thought? When you believe that thought? Where does the feeling hit you? Where do you feel it in your body when you believe that thought? Think of one of your pessimistic thoughts and go along with me in these questions. What pictures do you see when you believe that thought? Watch it. Be still. When did that thought first occur to you? How do you treat others when you believe that thought? What do you say to them? What do you do? Whom does your mind attack, and how? How do you treat yourself when you believe that thought? Is this where the addictions kick in and you reach for food, alcohol, credit cards, and the TV remote? Do thoughts of self-hatred occur? What are they? All of us act as if our beliefs are true. Even you-yous who can't articulate their beliefs act as if their implicit beliefs are true. if someone says something and hurts our feelings, we might tell a story saying, that person is mean. Every time we see them, we look for behavior to confirm our view of reality. And then, if they confound us and actually act nice the next time we see them, we think, what is their real agenda? Question 4. Who would you be without that thought? How would you live differently if you didn't have that thought? Close your eyes and imagine life without it. Imagine you are meeting this person for the very first time with no story. What do you see? Who are you right now, sitting here without that thought? Byron Katie encourages us to forget our stories and live now. Zen Buddhists talk about living in the present moment. And even those great mystics, stockbrokers, say that past performance is no guarantee of future earnings. When we change our story, when we change our story of the world changes. Past perceptions are no guarantees of future perceptions. And Byron Katie takes this process one step further. Turn the thought around. What she means by this resembles the psychological concept of projection. We often project onto others what we hate in ourselves. If we think that someone doesn't like us, probably somewhere deep inside we don't like them. And it's just easier to admit that they don't like us. We need to look honestly at our part in any interpersonal problem. It's not about taking the blame from others and blaming yourself. It's stopping the story of blame. It's about a radical universalism. It's about loving your neighbor as yourself and loving yourself just as you are. She writes, when I am perfectly clear, what is what I want. Everyone and everything is doing its job perfectly. This is hard for me. Even my universalism, my social work history of learning Carl Rogers and unconditional positive regard. Because I love to protest. I love to be politically active. I even read the emails that come to me that say, we got to change the world. We have, 3 days to contact our congressman. And I often do. But the important part for this, for me, is I'm pretty good at trying to keep from being self-righteous. But the hardest part for me is to give up the concept of righteousness. Where it works for me is when I think of the life work of King and Gandhi, that sense of be the change you want to be in the world. And to keep from vilifying somebody else while they are vilifying you is one of the hardest spiritual practices. And because I got a quick mind, I can come up with an insult real quick. So I ask now, during our response period, to enter into the struggle of this, or tell me why you don't want to enter into the struggle of this as we go forward. Any responses when you hear this? Byron Katie.
I'll say that it has become easier for me not to, because I have a quick tongue too. My family often thinks I'm a lot like the sister from Designing Women with the quick mouth. But it has become a lot easier for me not to return the insult. And I think with some sadness that it's because I'm not surprised by much anymore. And I think that it really is with some sadness that some of the things that I hear are said and done and accusatory and, taken in a villainous manner, if that's a word. I don't know, just don't have much stock anymore. So it's just easier to shuck it off your shoulder than to bear the run in your belly about it sometimes.
I have a hard time loving the world as it is, and I think it goes against my grain to accept things. And I don't think that you have to necessarily return venom for venom, but I think you should not just sit there and take it. I think you should try to show the illogical and the irrationality of that person's argument, and if they don't go along with that, then you withdraw because you're not using it against the wall. But I don't want to get into this self-delusional navel gazing where you just go into your closet and accept what is. That's not me.
I think one of the more challenging phrases in the Bible is that resist not evil, but overcome evil with good. And for me, that's the way that I can understand this, is that I can either focus on tearing down those who are making a bad world or building a better world, but not be so caught up in every fight.
The part that I'm kind of struggling with is, who do you become without that thought in your head? Oh, excuse me, sorry. Who do you become without that thought in your head? He said, take a situation, and I got the war in Iraq. Now I'm like, okay, if I don't see that as a horrible, terrible aggression on our part, and just horrendous, and kids dying, if I don't see that as wrong, how do I turn that around? And who am I if I don't feel some of that righteous indignation and the need to get out and protest it and the need to write letters? It doesn't seem to be practical to me to not acknowledge that something really sucks and I gotta do something.
I think someone who stands on a corner every Friday night and protests this war, yet is also a much more follower of Byron Katie than I am.
Yeah, Katie is probably for me my single most important teacher and has been for several years, and I've been lucky enough to work with her some. Katie first says, start with what's close to you. Don't start with your whole vision of the political world. Start with the judgment, my husband should take out the trash because he doesn't care about how I feel, and and the whole story we tell. And we have them, and they're so close that we start with what's close, and we write it down. We write it down. We don't think it, we write it. And the reason to write it is that gives us a chance to really do inquiry on the thoughts that make us suffer. Okay? So we write them down because your mind doesn't want you to find it, really. But if you inquire, you will find that you're creating a lot of suffering, enormous suffering. The turnaround is about finding out that you've been looking for your own advice. It's for you to live. It's not for everyone else to live. It's for you to live. The place that we come to is when I say, George Bush doesn't listen to anything that other people say. I also, in the turnaround, come to see, I don't listen to Mr. Bush. He opens his mouth, and my mind is closed.
That's true.
So he and I are the same. In that way, I find my humility. And the other piece I have to look at is, do I listen to my own words? So there's a lot of good advice for me. And when I stop the war in my mind, I stop creating war, then I become a model of peacefulness. If I stand out there on Fridays, and I do that for me to remember that I'm deeply committed to peace. That's all. It's not because I think I'm going to change national policy. It's so that I can stand out there and wave to everybody who comes by, whether they give me half a peace sign, they smile back, whatever. To me, the most peaceful thing Katie says, the most peaceful one idea she has that I have found extremely useful is, remember, everybody in the world loves you. They just may not all know it yet. And that allows me to also extend that there is not a person on this planet who I don't love. I may not know it yet. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
At this time, we'll take our offering, and I'm sure this conversation will continue for a lifetime. Morning offertory, played by Erna, is by Chopin.